Hey everybody, thanks for joining us on our YouTube channel today. Just in case you missed out on our monthly queer book club, we have an awesome author today that I have the privilege of being able to interview, and I would like him to take it away. Feel free to introduce yourself.
Unlawful Peace family. I am Khafre Abif. I'm an Atlanta-based HIV social justice and bisexual activist. I'm an author, a editor, a blogger, a writer, and an artist who has been living with HIV for 33 years. My published work consists of In Our Own Voices, The Changing Face of Librarianship. It's published in 2000, no, 1996. Cornbread, Fish, and Collard Greens, Prayers, Poems, and Affirmations for People Living with HIV, and Sistah'S Speak. I'm currently in the final edits of Sistah'S Speak Volume 2 that's going to go to print in January. And so I have a number of other projects I'm working on, but I'm excited to do this follow-up kind of interview so you guys know what we were doing when we had our initial book discussion.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Auggie. I'm the current president of Bisexual Queer Alliance Chicago, and what we affectionately like to call the org BQAC. And we have so many different uh, programs, and this is being one of them. Currently, our host, our in-house drag queen Diva Exit Lamore, is on a sabbatical until March. So we're pretty much that leaves me to doing her co-hosting duties. So it's awesome to have Khafre with us today, who's been part of our December book club. So if you had a chance to not be there, this is your opportunity to come by, check out our YouTube channel, drop a like, a comment. That helps all of us who like this type of content be able to see it on the YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't already, definitely consider subscribing. Yeah, thank you so much, Khafre, for being here today. Uh, yeah, we had a wonderful time at Queer Book Club, and um, I just wanted to know. My first question was like, how was your writing process specifically? Let's go with Sistah'S Speak. How did you go about that process when you were writing it?
Well, actually, Sistah'S Speak is an anthology, so it's a collection, I think, of 67 or 68 different women's voices who are living with HIV. What I did was I put out a call for submissions, developed a call for submissions, and put out a call for submissions throughout um, my social media, uh, throughout Facebook and different Facebook groups, direct emailing women that I knew and had their email address, the women that I knew that were HIV positive, and sat back and waited to see what would happen. I didn't know if I did. Well, I thought that I would get. I thought that women would trust me because many have seen or heard about cornbread, fish, and collard greens. So I thought that that I'd have some trust built based off of the first anthology about people living with HIV, and so submissions started coming in, and it's funny because um, the reason why I'm doing Sistah'S Speak Volume 2 is because I got all these women who came up to me after Sistah'S Speak was published and said, Khafre, I didn't know about it. And oh, I want to share my story. And I didn't know. And you didn't reach out to me and all this woe is me stuff. And I was like, man, for me, once I kind of finish a project, I kind of move it aside and be done with it so I can move on to my next, publishing project. But this one with Sistah'S Speak, volume 2 just came as a result of that. And so it really is getting it, and the editing part is really about trying to edit for grammatical and punctuation, but at the same time trying to keep it so that the woman's voice is her true voice. Like that when she reads it, she'll hear herself And like when it's read out loud, you'll say, "Oh, that's so and so," because that's the way she speaks. So it's challenging to do that. And I know when Sistah's Speak came out, people were looking at it and they got it. You know, some people really got it. You know that this is what I was trying to do in the editing process. That I was really trying to allow these women's voices to come through in their own individual ways. So I'm not editing the book or editing the contributions throughout for punctuation, and that I'm allowing. I clean it up where needed to be, but I really allow the women's voices to ring through.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. And that leads me into my next question, which goes into your first anthology, Cornbread, Fish, and Collard Greens. You've been uh, a survivor for over 33 years, so you've had, your story along with multiple other stories of HIV survivors. I'm just curious to know, how was that process, and I know it must have been very cathartic for you, being a person living with HIV and dealing with medical developments of different treatments over the years. How was that process, as you as a survivor are dealing with this, and then getting other survivors to be able to share their voice, whether it was through poetry or prayers or even affirmations.
Yeah, it's interesting because these ideas for these projects come to me, and I never, I never really considered myself a great writer or editor. Um, but during the process of editing Cornbread, I actually had some help by a woman named Catherine Zagrath, who is a wonderful editor and writer and poet herself. But she gave me some wonderful tips on editing, and it really taught me how to approach editing. But the Cornbread came about pretty much the same way as Sistah's Speak. I had the idea, I developed a call for submissions, and I started submitting calls for submissions like everywhere. Um, Cornbread turns out has 127 different contributors, and they are from around the world, from the continent of Africa, from the continent of Asia, from the United Kingdom, from South America, and they're all in their indigenous language, the English translation. But for me, um, when I went about doing it, I couldn't tell my story and share my story without the collective community being a part of the storytelling or part of the sharing. And so for me, it was cathartic being able to write some of the things that I wrote for Cornbread were things that I guess had been sitting in my heart, and I finally had a chance to write to get it out. But also the contributions from other people and reading their contributions really gave me a real sense of really that the project, I never thought that I'd make money off the project, which I haven't. But I know what the project has done for the individuals who have written contributions. I know what it has done for myself, and I know what it's done for people who have gotten a hold of copies of Cornbread and read it. And I'll just share a couple of stories. There was one gentleman who reached out to me who said that his partner had died the year before, the year before, and the day Cornbread showed up at his house was a year to the day his partner had died. And when he opened the book up and started reading, flipping through and started reading, he could do nothing but be filled with joy because there was somebody who understood his partner's experience and his partner's journey, and that he had that to hold on to with Cornbread. There have been other people who have gotten a hold of Cornbread, who lived in these rural areas, who have no support groups, who are very, live very isolated lives with their diagnosis. And I've gotten a hold of Cornbread, and it's been their saving grace, because even though they haven't told anybody, they still haven't shared with anybody, they have a place to go to read something daily to help support them in living. And so that's what Cornbread has done, and I'm excited about.
Wow, that's really amazing to hear. And the fact that, you're getting emails and even DMs throughout your social medias about the impact that your work has made on other people, especially folks who are living with HIV. So that's just really awesome to hear. Which also leads me to my next question. Just like you, I'm a person of color. I'm Puerto Rican, Cuban, and Spaniard, and you being African American. Um, what are some of the different biases you've had to deal with being a person of color, being bisexual, and living with HIV? What are some of the different biases and stigmas that you've gone through, throughout your life, that you don't mind sharing with the audience?
I think one of the biggest ones is that as a bisexual man living with HIV, that I've been the cause of the rising rates of HIV among Black women, which is just simply untrue and not true. And research has been done to prove that it's not true. That because I'm bisexual, I'm promiscuous, because bisexual is the reason why I got HIV, because could be considered a stereotypical Black man who is all about sex. Because when people hear bisexual, what they hear is sex, you know, uh, not, and don't disconnect my identity with the actual behavior, which is really disheartening. I have, as a Black man, I have had so many different experiences with uh, biases and issues around race, issues around phobias, biphobia, bi erasure, and also dealing with people's just altogether attitudes and their misconceptions about who I am as a person, who I am as a man, who I am as someone who's living with HIV, who I am as someone who is of color. And so um, I'm 56 now, and I have found a place and space in my mind and in my heart and in my being to not let those things affect who I am in my life. I think years ago, those things had a great effect on how I looked at myself. But I've gotten past those things, and how I look at myself is how I want to, how I look at myself now. And for the past many years has been that I'm a gift. I have talents and gifts, and it's been a privilege to be able to share those talents and gifts through the work that I do.
Wow, that was very inspiring. Thanks for sharing that.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
we all have our own coming out stories, and especially for us bisexuals, there's been times where we've had to tell them not just once, but multiple times. And I'm just curious to know, what was one of your first coming out stories, whether it was to your then partner or friends. I just wanted to know what your story was.
Well, actually, when I got to college, I found a group of men. They were all gay men that I hung out with and had this kind of coming out. And I was dating women at the time. I was dating women. I've always dated women. I was dating women, and told them that I like women and I like men. But because I was in their circle, because I kikied with them in the way that gay men kiki, they didn't believe it. And it wasn't until we left college and I got married that I guess they said, "Oh, this shit's real." But I also lost those relationships because I got married to a woman. And it's interesting. Just in the last year, I reconnected with those men who have said that they miss me and I miss them. Some who have been looking at what I've been doing at the national level, from my posts and different social media and things on Facebook and other social media things. One gentleman told me that I had been inspiring to him, and he actually is now living with HIV. He became positive in his mid 40s. And all that time before that, he had been watching me in silence, watching me with what I was doing and how I was approaching it, how I was living out loud, and that kind of thing. But then there's also the coming out to my mother and sharing, that I'm bisexual with my mother was easier than I had it in my own head. I was thinking that this is going to be a come to Jesus moment for her, or for me, or her wanting me to come to Jesus. Um, but it didn't turn out that way. It turned out that that her love was unconditional. Uh, and then there's the women that have been in my life as an adult. My first wife, and any women that I engage with now has really been about. It's hard for people not to know I'm bisexual, because if you are on any medium, it comes up. You can Google my name, and bisexual is going to come right with it, as well as HIV. And so it's been interesting to do that. The coming out, and I'll share one more coming out. I actually had to come out to my children. I had to. I think it was at age. Both of my boys, I told them I was HIV positive when they were 10 years old. And then when they were 13 or 14, I had a discussion with them about my sexuality. After they had went through puberty, a discussion with them about my sexuality and sharing with them that I was bisexual and this is what that meant to me and for me. And so I've had several different ways, like you said, there's several different coming outs as bisexual for me that I had to have. And all of those experiences kind of shape and form who I am today in terms of how I am so willingly public about my sexual identity.
Thanks for sharing that. What reverberated with me the most is just when you came out to your mother, just her unconditional love as a mother to her child. I know when it comes to coming out to family, hearing different stories where some folks, their parents have been accepting, and sometimes it's even more traumatic where you're disowned by your blood family, but then you have your chosen family who accept you for who you are. So to hear that just resonated a lot with me. And so thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So you were talking about a gentleman a while ago, how he ended up having HIV, in his 40s, and then saw what kind of movement you've been part of. You're not just a author, but also an activist, and you've also been involved with political legislation, and even in terms of bringing bisexual folks who identify themselves as bisexual within the queer umbrella to academia. I know because we're mutual friends with a fellow academic, Dr. Lauren Beach, and you and her, and along with Robin Ox and a few other well-known bisexuals, were in Washington recently, towards like the third or fourth quarter of the year. How was that experience, and being able to be back in the White House post pandemic, and being able to discuss more legislation and policies that could help, folks who are bi plus individuals, within the US?
Well, we actually were at the White House during Bisexual Visibility Week. in September. And I had gone to the White House in 2015 and 2016, the last 2 years of the Obama administration. And during that time, we really presented some policy issues. But when we went this time, we had a different plan. We actually presented some benchmarks that we wanted to see from federal government throughout the federal government. And it was really great to actually put those out there. We had it was a much smaller group. I think we had 14 or 15 of us that went to the White House in September, and it really went well. We really had a tight agenda and a tight program because we only had a short amount of time to present to these folks. And there were folks from HHS there, folks from SAMHSA, folks from HRSA, folks from the White House, of course, and it went really well. We as a collective group have since then had several different Zoom calls to let the larger bisexual community know who wasn't present what we did and what we're doing and what we are doing. And so we're staying in touch and contact with those people we met during that meeting. We're opening up our width and our bandwidth with expanding through other contacts that those folks have given us. And we want to hold the administrations and these agencies accountable for how they think about and how they basically some of what we want is to not be erased as those agencies continue to do their work. That while they're doing their work and they're talking about gays and lesbians, that they actually use the word bisexual, print the word bisexual, and include bisexual people in the work as not as an afterthought, but as a current thought to deal with it like they deal with with the G and the L.
Yeah, bi erasure is prevalent, in so many different spaces. So to continue on that struggle and movement of bi visibility is huge and monumental. So thank you for doing that work. And us at BQAC, we're trying to keep that visibility alive as well amongst our bi and queer family. And that's why we're here today, and we are very inclusive and diverse. We love when folks of color like yourself are interviewed and your voice gets to be heard. So it's great to be both on a local and national and even international level, a gatekeeper, and to be a medium of sorts within our organization to allow these different voices to shine, especially when some of them are muted in certain spaces. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
So earlier you were talking about different projects that you have in the pipeline. I know Sistah'S Speak Volume 2 is coming out in January once it's printed. Are there any other works that you're currently working on?
Oh, I'm working on a photo book called Face Us, Not Our Status, But Our Story. And it's a book of black and white photos of people living with HIV in the South, headshots. I'm working on Raising Kazembe will be a memoir. And Raising Kazembe are letters that I wrote to my son from my first son since before he was born until he was about 10 years old. And it talks about the ebbs and flows of my health, my mental health, my physical health, my social, my physical health, and also talks about how I was raising him and what I was doing. It talks about my work. It talks about it. I was writing letters to share what was happening on a daily basis. I didn't write every day to him, but I was writing about the day when I wrote to him and what was going on. So so that one's Raising Kazembe. I'm also working on a book called Trans Voice Shout Out Loud, trying to collect stories and voices from the trans community. And that's also includes non-binary folks. And let's see what else. He Ain't Heavy. He Ain't Heavy is a take off the the saying, "He ain't heavy, he's my brother." But "He Ain't Heavy" will be another work of stories and voices from heterosexual men that are living with HIV. And so those are a few that I have going on right now, um, that I hope to get out after I get Sistah'S Speak Volume 2 off my desk.
Awesome. Those are a lot of awesome projects. I do remember on Facebook, since Khafre and I are Facebook friends, you talking about uh some details about raising Kazembe. So I'm really interested in supporting you and getting that once it's published and printed. So I'm looking forward to that when you're able to get to that memoir. So I'm definitely looking forward to that, and then along with all these others, and then especially the one with trans and non-binary folk, just like with bisexuals, and a lot of bisexuals tend to also be non-binary or trans.
Right.
So and
And, I, yeah, that reminds me, I do have another anthology that's in the works. It's called All by Ourselves. And that is a book, hopefully, to get more bisexual voices out there so that people can. And actually, this is a book of bisexuals of color, um, um, by BIPOC, by POC folks, so that our voices can be heard, our stories can be told. Um, and like I said, when we met the last time at the book club, that quote by Barry Lopez just continues to stick with me. He says that, when stories come to you, care for them and learn how to give them away when they're needed, because sometimes a person needs a story more than they need food to eat. And I think that so much is going on in the world that that someone it's just like I was talking about cornbread. Somebody gets a hold of cornbread, and it is the food that they needed for that day to continue going forward. And I think these other books as well, these other works, can be that as well, that people really, people need to hear from each other. People need to know that their voices are valid. And I think particularly when you All by Ourselves and Trans Words Shout Out Loud, that these will be two works that people will come to and say, wow, I didn't know that. Wow, I learned something. Wow, that person is amazing. Wow, I didn't know that they experienced that kind of whatever. And so I'm excited about continuing to do the work.
awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, thank you for being here today and sharing a bit of your story when it comes to your works, as an author, being an activist, being involved with politics and policy, and being a survivor living with HIV, and sharing your story so that it could be heard along with the other voices that you've helped introduce through Cornbread, Fish and Collard Greens, and Sistah'S Speak. And you being a gatekeeper and allowing other folks to hear, let their voices be heard through your work. So thank you so much for coming by today.
Thank
um
you.
we're gonna drop a couple links for Khafre's work if you're interested in purchasing them and supporting them. um if you haven't already, definitely consider dropping a like. If you want to drop a comment as well, that definitely helps us with our algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Thank you.